We had a gentleman this morning who was having issues with the picture as well on his end. I'm not sure.
Oh, there we
go. Hey, we can see you.
It says start video.
Start video.
You want to leave it like this? We have just two screens. We have both of you guys.
Yep.
One guy went to the University of Minnesota, and the other guy has a Detroit hat on.
Yeah.
So I kind of dig that.
We're a confused couple of guys.
Well, a couple of guys like you look like you should be confused. Are you having a good time tonight? It's 7 o'clock where you are, right?
Yep. Yes, it is. Yep, we are.
All right.
We're having a good time.
Are we recording this that you're going to put it on a program or something that you run, and then it's forever?
Yeah.
So do you have a start? You have a start time, or are we doing it?
That's the idea. We're kind of going right now because we always account for technical issues. I'm AJ, by the way.
I can see it. Your name.
Yeah.
Also known as Andrew, right? AJ and.
Yeah, AJ and Andrew. This is Andy over
Andrew.
Here.
That's Andrew.
Yeah,
and you're AJ.
And I'm AJ.
Okay.
I'm the guy that you talked to a couple weeks ago.
Got it.
So on the phone.
Okay, happy to meet you guys.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you too. But yeah, I was kind of telling Andy the technical side is kind of the part I'm afraid of the most. You know, getting to talk to you and everything. I'm confident by that part, but getting the Zoom going and getting the recording going.
You guys have
and
done a good job. I know it's kind of intimidating because the guys who design these things are techies, and if they had their druthers, we would have to type in code in order to access stuff, and then retype the code, and then upper, lower. Yeah, I grew up with that.
100
I know
that stuff.
My wife is very good at this stuff. She just keeps pushing at it, but Zoom has done a good job,
right?
Making it like a street sign. Turn here, park here, get out of the car, don't forget your keys,
right?
All that.
Making it user friendly. All right. Well, welcome to the Small Market Podcast, Mr. Cobb. We appreciate you
guys
joining us.
To ask me.
Yeah, absolutely. We both read your book, but before we get into that, I guess we want to give a little. If you want to give a little overview of who you are, why do we have you on the show?
Good, you tell me.
Well.
I'm only going to repeat what you said. You said, Mr. Cobb, you're the grandson of the immortal baseball player Tyrus Raymond Cobb, who played for the Detroit Tigers from 1905 to 1926, managed them for 3 years, then went on to play with the Philadelphia Phillies under that famous manager that they had, and along with Tris Speaker in the outfield, and all of that good history. Most people know that.
Right.
So I'm happy. Retired with 90 Major League Baseball records. If I go through them all, then your half hour will be up. But still, he has, some of them are very strange, but and some of them he still holds. Nowadays they do everything statistically, so you can take a 5-year grouping of a guy's performance, and you can take 3 or 4 of those with Ty Cobb, and his average for over a 5-year period, consecutive 5-year period, would be above close to 385, which is pretty. It's interesting. A lot of interesting stuff in terms of numbers, but I think that the fun part is to read other baseball players' descriptions of Cobb's presence on the field and what he meant to the ball, the game of baseball in the early days of baseball, and to hear things from mouths like Casey Stengel to say, to have seen Cobb or to have watched him play was miraculous, and he has some very, very complimentary quotes. So we'll take it from there. I personally played baseball, and when I got to high school, I made the team, but they put me in the outfield. I was out in center field for about 2 weeks. I didn't have one fly ball come out to me, and I said, ridiculous, just ridiculous. So I started playing tennis, where I got to hit the ball or chase the ball every time it came over the net, and I had a lot of fun. And I still play tennis and played through college. So
yeah. Oh, now what did you do for a living, Mr. Cobb?
I'm in the investment business. I deal in real estate in California. I've done major acquisitions all over the United States for institutions, and I invest in the stock market, but I don't advise many people. I have a few friends, and we gather and try and understand things. And I'll get into that because Detroit has a lot to do with my descriptive attitudes on what a young guy looks for, like you guys. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I'll get into that right now if you want.
Yeah, that would be fine.
Go right ahead.
Okay, well, you know that Ty Cobb grew up in a small town outside of Royston, Georgia, and he was in that area, and that was pretty backwoodsy. When he was growing up, he had an interesting father who was what you'd call an itinerant professor. He would go around to communities and fill out an application and offer to teach schools to anybody and everybody. He was an abolitionist, so he insisted that every child in the community came to his school. Now, he was good at this. I mean, he was sought after, but my grandfather, for money, used to work a cotton field that his father had leased the land, and he worked with a young Negro kid. They're about the same age, and they took turns literally plowing the field behind a mule in the heat in the summer, and then trading off and using a fishing pole and going down and testing their luck. So when he eventually ended up in Detroit, it was a big city. Detroit was one of the fastest growing cities in the United States at the time, and for good reason. And everybody should understand that when a new industry hits a town, everybody gets a job and the town grows enormously. And do you know the industry that hit Detroit?
The auto industry.
Yeah. Auto industry. There were over 140 automobile manufacturing companies when Ty Cobb arrived in Detroit. So he got to meet a lot of people. He met Louis Chevrolet. He met the Dodge brothers. I don't think he met Henry Ford. Granted, he never mentioned that he did that, but he met Thomas Edison, and Thomas Edison and him had several exchanges. So he was right in the middle of technological change. An automobile was a technological change and impacted this country. So he could go out in the evening. You know, you didn't play ball. Well, first of all, ball games in those days were 2.5 hour affairs at the most. So he had time, and he was an avid reader, and he liked culture, so he could spend time at art galleries or musical events. He loved the violin, and he would meet these industrialists in the various local places where they gathered, mainly the nicer hotels, and they encouraged him to look at what they were doing. So he actually got to go to a factory, a Chevrolet factory and that, and they said, you know, you should invest in this. This is your savings. This is your future. And so that in itself is something I encourage all fellows your age to look around at the world and see what's new and taking the place of something that's old. And we went through that in this country. Automobiles, trains before that. The Pony Express was displaced by the telegraph by the telephone. And in our case, between automobiles and today, there was one other major, you call it a revolution, but, you know, a real advance now. Once you realized in the late 70s, early 80s, particularly going into the 90s, that everything could be digitized, like we're enjoying the benefits of doing, and you look around and say, hey, you know, literally a year ago, Zoom stock was $20 a share. Do you guys know what it is today?
No, I do not.
$550. So if you'd taken your $2,200 that you spent on your vacation and bought 100 shares of Zoom, today you would have, well, 100 times 550 in a year. Now, that doesn't happen every day. And of course, the COVID-19 has accelerated all things to keep us at a distance. But Cobb was astute. He loved to read. He loved to learn things by observing. He was a scientist as a baseball player, so he really watched people, how they behaved. You guys play poker, so you always look for a tell. Ball players have tells, pitchers have tells, and that was the science of baseball that he loved. All right, so that's a little bit of background. That's what I appreciate. I like what you guys are doing. You guys will take this program and you'll do great things with it. Get a following. sell some advertising, maybe Coca-Cola or maybe Dodge trucks or something. And, next time I see you guys will be wearing tuxedos and drinking martinis and talking to me again. And I hope so.
In our dreams, yes, that would be the case. But
yeah.
That's the plan, huh?
Right, yeah, that would be wonderful.
Right. Now, we have a lot. I have a lot I wanted to talk to you about, so as long as you'll let me bend your ear, if you got to go for dinner or something, you just tell me to shut up and we'll let you go. But my old school guy, as I kind of told you over the phone a couple weeks ago, is your grandfather, Ty Cobb. A lot of people, they tout on Babe Ruth or Honus Wagner, but Ty Cobb is my guy, and probably not just because we live in Michigan, but I liked his style of play. I love the game of baseball, and personally, not a lot of people understand this, but he changed the game literally. You talk about people who changed the game, and it happened 100 years ago, so people don't understand this, but baseball was basically a vaudeville show. And then your grandfather entered it and took it seriously and was competitive and changed it. It wasn't a show anymore, and I think there was some reluctance or he got a lot of pushback from other players and organizations. Why is this guy taking it so seriously? Does he not know that this is entertainment? Why is he competing so hard? But it kind of upped the level for everybody else and for the game of baseball. The game of baseball wouldn't be what it is today without your grandfather, as far as I'm concerned, and how he played the game, which was hard, I know there's no question in there, but what I wanted to get off the books right away is we're not having you on like that. I know that we talked about this before. Your grandfather fought in World War II. Mine did as well.
Actually, World War One.
World War One. I apologize. Yeah. And so they're both kind of very stern men, both a little hard, probably on their own sons. But I was very close to mine. I think you were pretty close to yours. And I think there's a different relationship there between our grandfathers versus what our fathers had with their fathers. So several years ago, you wrote a book about your relationship with your grandfather, and your father was not the most savory person in the world, but what we didn't want to talk about right now, and there's a lot of books that have been written about your grandfather that kind of enhance these legends and things like that. I'm not having you on to be an apologist for your grandfather or anything like that. We're not going to discuss those things because they're hard to, you can't prove and talk about that. And like I told you over the phone, if I had to walk around all day and apologize for the things that my grandfather did 70, 80 years ago, it would drive me absolutely insane.
Well, you're alluding to Al Stump, but Al Stump was kind of a scoundrel. I met him. If you read my book, I put a part of a chapter in there, and but Stump had his own agenda, and it's actually some of it's pretty amusing because a gentleman by the name of Charles Leishan wrote a book on Ty Cobb, published about 3 years ago, called Ty Cobb: A Terrible Beauty. And it's really quite well researched. And Charles is a professional writer he'll pick a figure in history or an event and really research it so that he's very certain as to what he's talking about. So he went back in old newspapers, he checked census reports, and he checked birth certificates. He found, where Al Stump had taken liberties with describing men that got into altercations with Ty Cobb. Leishan says, no, this guy was a white guy from XYZ. But Stump was an interesting character, and the interesting part about Stump's approach to his writing was he was basically a magazine writer of the sort that is like Field and Stream or a men's magazine, where you really sensationalize things. And he has been debunked several times. Most of it is available on the internet. You can go to the internet and find a piece by a gentleman by the name of Ron Cobb. Very interesting piece. He's no relation to anybody in my branch of the family whose last name is Cobb, but he describes some of the scoundrelous things that Stump did. Like, Stump was a great forger, and Stump forged many documents because he had stolen a box of letterhead from Ty Cobb's house and would write letters to himself congratulating himself on what a great job he did, and then forge Cobb's name. He forged various trophies, and then wrote an accompanying letter. Al, I want you to have this as a gift, and then forged Ty Cobb's name. And actually, somebody in your area, Ron Rajajian, who is who authenticates famous sports signatures, calls me all the time and says, Stump was a fake and he was a liar, an exaggerator, and all that. So we can pass over that. It's not. It's an episodic type of a conversation, but Stump has been shown to be a liar and a forger, and most of the things that he asserted about Ty Cobb, both in his book Cobb and in his magazine articles, are not true. So we can go on to things that you're interested in that are true and that I can speak to by personal experience, or we can just chat about whatever you want.
Right. Well, that interests me as well because, I've read anything that's been published about Ty Cobb. But one of the things that you told me earlier, it goes back to the trophies and things. Mr. Stump would go into antique shops, purchase pewter bowls, and then have them engraved, from Ty Cobb to my friend Al Stump, those kinds of things, just to make it seem like he really had this deep connection with your grandfather when, the man was a liar and a fake. And those are things that could be attested to, right?
Yeah. So growing up, I was very fortunate. My father died when I was 8, and I was in 1951, a long time ago. But the next year, 1952, Ty Jr., my uncle, also passed away of a brain tumor. My dad died of a heart attack, and that was very, very hard on Ty Cobb, losing 2 sons in back-to-back years. And I can remember visiting my grandfather's home and how warmly he received my sister, especially. My sister was really kind of an adorable, light, redheaded girl with curly hair, and Granddaddy just loved her and would do anything. And he took the 3 of us, my older sister, myself, and my younger brother, and started spending 2 to 3 weeks every summer with us, either in Atherton, California, or at Lake Tahoe at his cabin. And so it was definitely a male image that was one that did not brag football, had a gentleness but a firmness, a worldly knowledge, and I benefited a great deal from that. How I got started writing my book, which is one of the questions that you said you would ask, is I had made notes of many of these times that I spent with my grandfather, and there was a time in my daughter's age. She was I think 12, and I was reading to her one evening, and we're looking at old pictures of her when she was just a kid, and she asked me to tell her some stories about my dad when I was that young, 3 and 4 and 5. Well, AJ, you've read my book, so I couldn't tell her any of the stories that I went through that I elicited or put down in my book, but I had a lot of funny stories about my grandfather, and she laughed, and she just could image this because I really elaborated on where we were. We're at Lake Tahoe, which is beautiful, and Granddaddy's cabin is not right on the beach, but it's up from the beach. He has beachfront property. And you have all these adventures at a lake. You guys know in Michigan you have wonderful lakes, and grandparents can take you out. And Lake Tahoe is like that for families. It's a beautiful alpine type lake. And so my wife suggested and insisted that I start typing these stories out. And I did. And I typed a whole bunch of them. Some of them I forgot to put in the book, but the book was getting long and this and that. But when I finished typing them out, I realized, if I put in my story, it's in such contrast with my experiences with my grandfather, that it may be of use to other families, other people who would find it interesting. Not only did it wasn't intentional, but my grandfather was an entirely different person as a grandfather than my father was as a father. And probably Ty Cobb was stern with his children. I mean, I don't doubt it. He was a perfectionist. You don't play 24 years of professional baseball and be at the top of the game without, you don't leave that at the ballpark every evening.
Right.
So that was the genesis of it, and it in many ways was quite cleansing for me. I got to, and was forced to, just as a person, go back and plumb my childhood for incidences that I had buried deep away, and accounted for my reluctance to be too public with who I was, because the questions would center around things that they eventually be things that I just didn't want to talk about. It was painful. But for me, writing is very cleansing. You get ideas out, you get emotions out, and you start digging around in all the crevices and find, I'm not so much bothered, except my mind hasn't resolved these things. It's you could make a saying out of, you can't be fearful of the past or the future, because those are really things that only exist in your mind now. They don't exist in real life. I mean, my father's not going to walk into this room and grab me and do nasty things. So anyway, that was part of the reason I wrote the book. Also, I wanted Madeline, our daughter, she's 31 now, and Ty is 28. And I wanted them to have a book of their great-grandfather and stories about my childhood that were meaningful to me.
Absolutely. Andy just got done reading the book. I went back and read it again because, like I said, I read it probably 4 or 5 years ago. I know the book came out about 7, but and
you're right.
And I loved it. Well, I shouldn't say I loved it. It was emotional. And for 36, 37-year-old guys to read something about sports and get emotional about something, and it's not even directly about sports, but it has a sports tie to it. It was just a really...
Is it really... I mean, to interrupt you, it's just a really, really well-written book. So descriptive. You feel like you can just connect with things. Ty making hot cocoa over the stove in his robe and stuff. The way it's so descriptive, it takes you there. My grandfather's old guy, I can remember going to his house on the farm and stuff, and that's exactly how he'd make hot cocoa and stuff. And there's some aspects that are extremely relatable because they're so descriptive in the book.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So let's talk. You have a category here about collectibles. Unless you want to go out, I don't know what your time frames are.
No, I wanted to go back to your book a little bit and plug it just kind of one more time. Definitely want to talk about collectibles, but you said that and maybe we have to edit this part out because you don't want to talk about it, but you're working with a screenwriter or someone in that area to kind of to turn this into a movie, to turn Heart of a Tiger into a movie. Well,
yeah, let's talk about it. It is an interesting. I have a buddy who's done some acting in Hollywood, and he likes writing, and he's we've chatted over a long time before he said, I am really interested, and if you agree, let's write a screenplay based upon your book, because your story is...
It's magnificent. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's universal. And so we have been doing that, and it's a lot of fun. You guys are in the business of creativity, so you realize that as you put stuff together, the pieces come together. A show that you put together, you can edit to say, "Wow, this is really a fine piece. This will last for a long time. People get something out of it." Part of writing a book is that, particularly having a famous person as the center, is that I get invited to give book talks a lot of places. And I have had literally dozens of book talks, and at every one of them, afterwards, men of all ages come up to me and say, Mr. Cobb, I read your book, and that's my story. I've never told anybody what I went through. Could you have time for a cup of coffee or a drink? And I always accommodate them, and they sit down and they start talking, and they had a stern father and a grandfather who taught them how to fish and go into a boat, a canoe, or taught them something to do. And it skips that generation, and you find that, the fathers are busy, they're working, they're distracted, or whatever the story is. And one book talk I gave was at the college I graduated from. And I gave a book talk there, and it was very well attended. And I had fraternity brothers there, and 3 of them came up to me and said, Herschel, I never knew any of this, but I want to tell you. I want to tell you about me growing up, because it's so similar. So in writing something that's going to be pictorial, and you can be, David Kelsey and I can be creative, we can bring home those points that show the importance of grandfathers, show what happens to kids, and it's an opportunity to reinforce a connection that somebody will find, maybe not on the surface, that they want to talk about over a beer or coffee, but they can take home and say, wow, I mean, that guy Cobb really sensed what he went through with his own kids, and how he didn't quite make it, and how he reconciled and cleared up his family life with his grandchildren.
Right. Absolutely.
It's not an uncommon story.
Right.
No, it's something that, as I have a 5-year-old and stuff, it's something that I feel there's lessons to be taken from the book when parenting, your children. Your grandfather just sets a really good example of the kind of man you want your sons and daughters to look up to you as, even as a father,
Sure.
Well, and what I love about your book, what I love about Heart of a Tiger, is that it's got a very kind of James and the Giant Peach feel to it, or Harry Potter feel to it, where there's kind of this abused character, but in your story, the hero is this mythic guy who kind of comes in at the right points, which is I just think it's really cool, and kind of puts your father in his place.
Well,
I mean, I don't know, you probably feel indifferent about that, but to me, it's, you want this guy to kind of, this big 300-pound guy to get knocked down or put down in his place, and there's only one man that can do that, and it's your grandfather, and it's the guy that we know as Ty Cobb. So
yeah. A lot of people have made comments similar to yours, AJ, and I think that is part of the. Well, I didn't set out to do that. Naturally, I just set out to give my kids all the stories and get a lot off my mind, and it had to happen that way. And now going through it again after 7 years, honestly, the experience is even more meaningful, because you think of Joseph Campbell and Hero with 1,000 Faces, books that you guys could read. That one's a little thick, but it's worth reading. And you see, wow, we treat people a lot nicer after you read some of this stuff than you might. And kids' mistakes are no longer so important. So
Absolutely.
Anyway, I've enjoyed it. I don't mind talking about it all, because we'll run it by some people, and when the screenplay is done, and they'll read it and they say, well, sounds good. Go get it.
It's one of those few books that I think, I mean, it was not only a cathartic experience for you to write, but it's kind of a cathartic experience to read it, as a fan of him. And, so anyways, I wanted to move on to collectibles a little bit. Now, you are kind of an old school guy, where there's not a lot of people in the baseball realm that encourage fan mail nowadays. You kind of encourage it, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, I kind of fell into it accidentally. Let's see. I wrote my book. It was published in 2013. And about 2 years ago, I received some fan mail letters with, the inexpensive baseball cards of Ty Cobb. Mr. Cobb, will you please sign? And I did. I said, oh, that's very nice. And then it happened enough. I asked one of these people, I included it on. I said, "How did you get my address?" And he wrote back to me and said, "Well, somebody had traced you down on the internet and then posted it on a site out of your region. It's either Canada or Michigan area with your address on it. And for the last year, I've got a whole, I get 3 or 4 or 5 mails a day with various requests, and people have sent, cards, good photos. Some of them send the dust jacket from my book. They want that signed. So it's fun. And, a couple of things that you guys would be interested in that I include. I'm going to hold this. Let me get this just right for this.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah.
So now that is my grandfather's signature stamp.
Yeah.
So if I have a pad with green ink in it, and I can do it right here. And a lot of guys send one card and they send a very polite note and this and that. So I always try. I'm kind of like you guys. They'll get a card back.
That's awesome.
Like that.
In green ink.
Very cool. Yes.
Just
in green ink.
Yeah.
And they have that for their collection. And I think it makes them very happy. And just to be a tease on them, they do a self-addressed stamped envelope, and where they have the return address, their address, right? They want to mail it to them, and they have the return address, not me. I always overstamp that with Ty Cobb so they can never throw away that envelope. Have some fun. And that's been that's actually a lot of fun. I can take half an hour at the end of the week and accumulate everything. And so recently I received a packet from a young man, Denmark.
Wow.
First one out of town. One time I got a cell phone call, a text message, and the text message was out of the blue. And it said, "Hi, Mr. Cobb, are you," in caps, "the famous Herschel Cobb, grandson of Ty Cobb?" I said, "Uh-oh, this I'm fishing, right? Do not tap on this." Anyway, so I let it go, and I got another one. And it said, "Hi, Mr. Cobb, this is Max. I texted you before. How are you?" And it says, "Can I call you?" And I said, "Okay." So this 13-year-old boy named Max calls me up, and he wants this and that, and so he sent me his stuff, and he wanted a copy of my book, and I told him to talk to his mom or his dad, and because the first 2 chapters for a 13-year-old, I always give a caution.
They're a little tough. Yeah.
They're a little tough, so let your parents read that and then get to the fun stuff. So, I've had that type of experience, and as you guys, it's fan mail. You guys want to receive fan mail. We enjoyed your show. That'll keep it coming.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah.
So do you... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Before I forget it, someone sent you an original T206 of your grandfather, and you were reluctant to signing that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, sure. Yeah. A gentleman sent me a T206 Ty Cobb with the green background.
Oh, that's the big one. Yeah.
Yeah, and those are professionally graded. PSA grades them, and they can sell for a lot of money if they're, I think, a 7, 8, or 9.
Yeah.
There's one recently, maybe a month, 6 weeks ago, that Ty Cobb signed, a T206 green background signed by Ty Cobb. It was graded a 7 or an 8. I think it went for $115,000. It's nothing to fool around with. But this guy said he was going to send me this, and I said, well, I don't know about that. I don't want that responsibility. Anyway, it was a little bit ragged at the bottom. I don't know where he found it. It probably was a 0. And so I called up Ron in your area, the Ron I mentioned, who authenticates signatures. I said, look, if I sign this, what happens to the value? He said, well, what kind of shape it's in? I said, well, the bottom is deteriorated, and it's faded, and it's got a tear in it. So it's pretty ragged. He said, well, nevertheless, if you sign it, it will not enhance the value. And then Ron says with this very, very smile in his voice, he says, until you're dead. And then it might. So I'm thinking, wow. So anyway, I contacted the guy and I said, look, I don't want to impair your value, but if you want me to sign it, he says, definitely, I want you to sign it. So I signed it and sent it back. But it's the first one I've seen. Anyway.
I would imagine most people would be reluctant to sending you something like that. I mean, it's a one-of-one piece, and collectors, they dig that. That's to have the one and only one of its kind sign. I mean, that's, How many people would allow that to be signed?
And so for this gentleman, probably he'll hold that, and sooner or later, I'll join the...
Sure.
And he'll say, look, and it doesn't bother me a bit. Now, if you guys are interested in collectibles in the baseball world, then you should hit the website Heritage Auctions and just type in search for Ty Cobb, and you'll see that if you've got a 7, 8, or 9 graded T206, either green or black background, either a facial shot or bat off the shoulder or something, they get very expensive.
They do, yeah.
You'd have to get really, really good bonuses at the end of the year to say, I'm splurging. However, many people have these, and they have them in basically their savings accounts. Their safe deposit box at a bank, because the increase in Ty Cobb memorabilia and Babe Ruth memorabilia over the last 5 to 10 years has outgunned most investments you and I could make.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, I respect that. My grandfather did not leave all of the kids 20 or 30 of these because he had no inclination that these things were going to develop. And honestly, he was so generous in giving his signature that I sat with him many times, like I described in my book, where he'd buy a 55-gallon drum of Major League Baseballs every twice a year, sign them, and send them out. So there are a lot of baseballs floating around. And I've talked to buddies from the town that I grew up in and said, Herschel, do you remember those 2 baseballs that your grandfather signed that we ruined playing baseball with? Yeah, I remember them. I remember them. Well, it was a different time.
Sure.
But anyway, that's with the collectibles. And it is kind of interesting to see what happens to the value of those and how people, they respect them and they covet them. They trade them, Once a PSA firm got into grading collectibles, then you establish a criteria by which you can say this is worth something because a professional has attested. However, you guys aren't old enough, but I have a friend my age. We grew up together, and Jimmy and I played all kinds of ball together in grammar school. And then in high school, I went to the local high school, and Jim's family was a bit more sophisticated, and he went to a very nice prep school in very near Santa Barbara by the name of Thatcher. It's a high-end school. And then he went to Yale, and then he went into the Marines. Then he came back to California and went and visited his parents and asked his mom where his baseball card collection was.
Right.
Jimmy, I threw that out years ago.
Oh, of course.
I mean, Jimmy had really, really great old original cards. So that has happened. I've heard that from a lot of people. If they had their childhood collection of baseball cards, T206s and whatnot, that they would retire early.
Sure.
That was it.
Yeah.
So, now, do you have a personal collection of baseball memorabilia?
I have some items. AJ asked if I would dig out my grandfather's scrapbook. Now, he had 3 scrapbooks during his lifetime, and he distributed them among myself and 2 other families that were cousins. So I have one, and I can show you a page. It's all original stuff, and I dug it out. I don't open it often because the pages are old-fashioned paper and they deteriorate. So I am going to leave this seat, grab it, it's right behind me.
Okay.
I'm going to open up a page that is pretty neat.
This is pretty cool.
You realize this is like history you're looking at live.
Yeah, this is really, really cool. Oh
my gosh, that is huge.
Yeah.
This is like a wizard book.
You guys maybe can talk.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Right now, Mr. Cobb is looking through this giant scrapbook that I asked him to dig up. It's about, 3 feet by 2.5 feet?
Yeah, it's huge.
Typical page.
Oh, my Lord.
Let me get a position where it'll show on the screen.
Wow.
Out of the scrapbook. And so I think 1 or 2 pages I've taken to a professional photographer with great digital equipment and had it copied and framed. And I have it around here somewhere. I don't remember where, but there are pages in here that are like this that are filled. The scrapbook is filled with them. Some of it is just sports writing, cartoons. I don't see, I hope this comes through, but you can see it's an old-fashioned type scrapbook and the pages deteriorate.
Holy cow.
Wow.
I think this is the page I have digitized. It really turned out nice. We did a sepia color. Can you guys hear me through the mic?
Yes, sir.
Yep, we can hear you very well.
We did a sepia color, put it in a nice wood frame, double matted. It's a nice office wall piece. And somebody say, where in the world did you get that? And he says, I don't know. I just out of my grandfather's scrapbook. My grandfather's scrapbook and that type of thing. So anyway, I've got to circle this because this is delicate. All right. I'm going to take care of this details later.
Sure. Well, I'm going to tell him this when he gets on, but
hang on.
Holy smokes. That is that's quite a treat for him to share that with us. That's amazing. Mr. Cobb is just getting settled and putting a few of those pages that fell out of the scrapbook back in.
I might stop this and say
he's a real supporter of professionalism in the game. And there's all kinds of articles. Some of them are really touching.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Some of the pages fell out of Mr. Cobb's scrapbook, so he was just kind of putting those back away, and they're very fragile.
You guys can hear me in some way. Mm-hmm. If you guys are you guys are in Michigan.
Yep.
This book by guy's name is Mark Oak Conan. He's got to be Dutch or something, but if you read that, he's created a scrapbook of 800 of Ty Cobb's games.
Holy
and
cow.
He annotates the box score in each of them.
Wow.
So, and they're dated. So here, July 10, 1919. So, I've used this many times, particularly in the scrapbook of talking about 1911, which was one of Cobb's best years. And so, you see a guy bunt 3 times and score 5 runs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's an but anyway, he's got all kinds of stuff in it. And in an email, I'll give you the details, but this is a nice gift.
That's
as
awesome.
A book. Anybody who's not only a Ty Cobb fan, but a baseball fan, because this guy went to a lot of work. All of the paragraph descriptions that he includes with each ball score and the events, describe the game, describe what was going on, who the major players were in that game.
I'm gonna enjoy that. I'm gonna have to add that one to my library for sure.
Yeah, it's worth happening. I mean, you're sitting around and guys are just watching TV and having a beer, and you say, "Here, take a look at this. Read a few games," and it goes through. And Cobb will have done this, and so the scrapbook has some great sports writing in it too. There was a real animosity between Detroit and Philadelphia and Cobb in Philadelphia, because Cobb was so instrumental in helping the Tigers beat Philadelphia so many times that Cobb actually received threats. And so Cobb naturally responded. He's not going to back down on that.
Right.
Next time I come to Detroit, I'm going to do this and this and this and this, and you get to read about it. And it filled up the stadium,
wow.
Which was what the business of baseball was about.
Right.
So,
it goes beyond that vaudeville thing that we were talking about. It's become a competitive game.
Yeah.
So he described it as war in one or two books.
Yeah, he took that attitude, and you have to sustain your competitive attitude and keep it on an edge. I mean, it's hard to imagine doing that for 24 years.
Right.
I'm sure it impacts your psyche.
Yeah.
All right, so we got fan mail and personal collection. I got some other things, but they're in a safe deposit box.
Sure, yeah. Well, I have to. I know I asked you to pull that out. Now I feel a little bad because I didn't realize how gigantic the thing was and how fragile it was. But
don't worry about it.
That was a treat seeing that. That was really cool, Mr. Cobb.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
So let me tell you this.
Sure.
I have a website, and if you guys got two computers, you can go to it right now, and it's called Tyrus R. Cobb. I think it's tyrusrcobb.com. And it has copies, digital reproductions of several photos that my grandfather gave to me. Most of them are signed. And it's just something I did years ago, thinking that somebody would like a copy. And at the time I had copies. Nobody ever goes to that website because nobody knows who Tyrus R. Cobb is. They know who Ty Cobb is. But anyway, for you guys, you could say, they're neat old photos.
Well, they will now. We're going to share this website.
We'll share the link on our Facebook page and stuff.
Yeah, you might get a few new sales that you didn't even realize.
Thanks. I like the extra work.
Right. Let's see. I'm kind of going through the outline.
Yeah.
Not many guests do we write up an entire outline because there's just so much stuff that I wanted to talk to you about. I'm such a ridiculous fan, and Andy has to put up with me, and thankfully he does. But let's see. Something I wanted to ask you is, you've got kind of a personal collection yourself. Andy and you talked about that. Have you ever made kind of like a pilgrimage, some of the spots that your grandfather came from or went to? Like, this is probably a dumb question. Have you ever been to Royston, Georgia?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I won't tease you guys. So the Ty Cobb Museum is located in Royston, Georgia.
Right.
Yep.
And it's about 40 minutes outside of Atlanta. Atlanta's a lot of fun. If you go the right time of year, the fall, like this time of year, probably beautiful. The museum, if you're a Ty Cobb fan or a fan of baseball in that era, it is remarkable. Much of what was in my grandfather's house in Atherton ended up in this museum, and it's worth seeing. And I've been there, I don't know, 3 times at least, because they've had various celebrations and they invite me, and it's kind of fun to get out of California.
Sure.
So I've made that trip. The more interesting trip was, for you guys' purposes, father-son trip. So in my book, you remember the chapter when we're going through Lodi and we collect all the fruit and take it up to Lake Tahoe?
Yep.
I mapped that trip out and then took that trip with my son, Ty, when he was about, maybe 15, maybe 16. And so now when Granddaddy took that trip and we were in the car, it was not rough roads, but they were basic California roads, 2-lane highways. Oh, the Valley of Fruit has grown up. You now have really nicely paved roads, and some of them are even 4-lane, and the fruit stands off to the left and the right are way off because they're not allowed to get too close to the highway. But Ty and I stopped at a couple. We drove up to Lake Tahoe, taking the Highway 50, which is more scenic and goes through the Sierras. And we went through South Shore Tahoe. You remember the Sportsman's a hardware store that we stopped at. We bought fishing gear in the book. We stopped there and looked around, and Ty's wondering, oh my God, what's Dad doing? Anyway, so we get up and we go to get to Ty Cobb's cabin. You go through a tunnel, and the tunnel where it's going through is called Cave Rock, and it's a big granite structure. And then once you go through Cave Rock, you just kind of time yourself to go about 150 yards, and then you're kind of blind. You just turn left and go down toward the water, because there's no marking that says there's a road there. And you get down to Ty Cobb's cabin, and there were some people renting it for a vacation. And so we knocked on the door, we took a bunch of pictures and showed Ty around there, went down to the beach and showed him the place of, a lot of childhood adventures. So that was a good father-son trip, and we had a good time.
Yeah. The reason I asked about Royston is because I was lucky enough to get to go through there myself. My sister and her husband at the time were, her husband was stationed in Hinesville, and so I had to help them move back from Georgia to Michigan one summer, and my brother-in-law took a separate truck, and my sister and I went another way, and we decided to kind of go around Atlanta, and I wanted to make it a point of going to Royston and seeing the Ty Cobb Museum and everything, so we spent a few hours in Royston, tiny little town, but pretty cool. I mean, it's just kind of set in this small little hospital, and I even asked about the cemetery, so I know that might seem kind of morbid or whatever, but
no, he's got a mausoleum there.
Right, so we checked out the mausoleum, and like a total baseball dork, I got pictures next to the mausoleum and stuff, but it was just kind of neat to. My sister was bored as hell, but it was just a treat for me to kind of get to go through there. I thought it was really. It is
cool. A treat. It's a neat museum.
Yeah,
they've got a lot of neat artifacts and a lot of history, and it's well put together and all that. Yeah,
absolutely. So. Yeah. See, I think we just have one or two questions left, and then we'll let you go.
Yeah. I'm just kind of really off the subject, but does your family? Do you have a relationship with the Detroit Tigers still at all, or does your family at all, or do you ever hear from them, or not for anything?
That's really interesting. I have never been to that stadium in Detroit. I should. And the family doesn't have a particular relationship with the Detroit Tiger, whoever owns it or whatever. I don't really even know.
Sure.
Naturally, we've got a pretty open invitation to the Hall of Fame. They somehow seem to know when any member of the family is going to show up, because they have an envelope with tickets, and you get a pretty neat tour. But I have a cousin, Cindy Cobb, who is very active on the internet. There's a group, Ty Cobb group, and she posts lots of articles and photos, and people will say, oh, Cobb was this, Cobb was that, and she is very, very gracious and polite and say, sir, you may be mistaken. You should read Charles Lershin's book. It's well researched. And I know, you can talk to my cousin Herschel. He knew Granddaddy. And so that's worked out well. I've made overtures to Detroit, but that's been years.
Sure.
I don't know. I could write him and say, this is who I am, and I'm going to bring my son and daughter and wife. Let's see.
They'd let you throw out the first pitch if you wanted, I bet. I'm sure they'd really celebrate you.
I'd leave that up to Ty.
Sure.
He's 6'5", and he can throw a bullet. We did have a lot of fun. We went to Atlanta, and as a family, and the Braves invited us to a ball game and interviewed us and announced who was attending. And they do this. I mean, all these ball clubs want families, and so they say, this ball player here, this famous ball player here. And so we gathered around the microphone, and they played the national anthem, and we all got to yell into the microphone, it's time for Braves baseball. And that was a lot of fun. They're very nice people.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Now, you said your son Ty is 28 years old. I thought I read somewhere that he plays baseball or basketball. Is that true?
Basketball. He plays D3 basketball.
Okay.
Yeah, he had a great time. Basketball is his game.
Good. What's he up to these days? What is he still in athletics or anything?
He's playing city balls right now. He's working, making a living. He lives in a nice area of San Jose, and he's in commercial real estate, working for a company that has a lot of properties, and he handles the leasing of those properties.
Okay. All right. Last thing I wanted to leave off with, and we'll let you go for the night. And you spent way more time with us than I deserve. But I wanted to share something from your book. Again, Heart of a Tiger, which you wrote about 7 years ago. This is just one of my favorite stories, and I think it's a testament to your grandfather's personality. There's this kind of inflated legend that he had like a big ego about himself or whatever, but you wrote about an instance where you and him kind of went into town, and this might have happened a couple times where the locals, or someone visiting like Tahoe would say, I heard Ty Cobb lives up that way. Yeah, I'm not sure which house exactly, but I know he lives up the hill a little bit or something, and he would just kind of say, yeah, I think I heard that too, and he could have.
That's exactly it. So, well, think about it, AJ. My dad and Ty Jr. Had to grow up with Ty Cobb as their father, and everywhere he showed up. And I think that Granddaddy realized that was a heavy way to have the kids grow up. Now, when that happened, and it happened a number of times in various contexts, he would put it aside. He never boasted to his grandchildren about baseball if they asked questions or whatnot. But yeah, that was a what you might call a very, very mature grandfather, to realize that to tell strangers who he was, they would immediately look at his grandchildren, and the grandchildren are never treated the same again. And he definitely wanted his grandchildren to have friends and not be held in a position where other people would stand off.
Sure.
I respect that quite a bit. Now, given that, I named our son after my grandfather. So I don't know if you know of Occidental College, a D3 school in Los Angeles.
Absolutely.
And he went out for the basketball team, made it as a freshman, and naturally, Lynn and I, my wife, were very keen on seeing him play. And for his freshman year, he was on the varsity, but he was our sixth man. It'd be 2 or 3 minutes before he'd get into a game. And Lynn and I went to a game, and Ty got into the game. So the announcer says, and entering the game is Ty Cobb, son of the famous baseball player. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what have I done?
Oh no.
However, he's 6'5", takes after my wife. She gets along with everybody and has a wonderful personality, and he could perform on the basketball court. And it's like, I hope you have kids, if they play athletics, they're the type of kids who play athletics, and you can look at them and say, if I had a team, I'd want that kind of person on my team. They're in a game, they're super competitive, the game is over, it's done. Shake hands and go have a good time with your friends. And Ty played football in high school, and he's 6'5", he's a big kid for his age. And I saw him knock guys over and help them up and say, Ty, it's competitive football in high school. You can leave him. And no, that's his nature. And the guy tries it again, he'll knock him over. But, so he's made a lot of friends, both high school and college, which is what you want your kids to do.
Absolutely.
So,
well, thank you.
All right. So if there's anything that you guys review on this, I'm sure you're going to edit this, make it look good. Give you a suntan, all that kind of stuff. Well, come on, Andrew.
My editing skills are only so good.
Yeah, okay, all right. You're off the hook. But just let me know, and we can do this again or just chat. The Zoom thing. It's a great get together.
Absolutely,
it's been a pleasure meeting you two, and I've enjoyed every moment of it, and hope you have too, and I hope that your fans find something useful in what we've talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to extend the invite. We'd love to talk to you again in the future if that's all right. And, thank you so much for your time today. We really, really appreciate it.
You're entirely welcome.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Yeah.
And if I overlook giving you any information like that scrapbook book's name, all the details on that, just let me know by email, and we'll take care of it.
Thank you.
With pleasure.
Thanks again, sir.
Awesome.
Appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon. And I've got to get your address so that we can send you a care package. So, we just really appreciate your help and we'd like to drop you a note.
Appreciated.
So, yeah. All right. Thanks, Mr. Cobb. You have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. You guys have a good evening too. Thanks. I'm going to sign off. Good night.
All right. Thanks. Good night.